times said that when she and her husband first got married, early in their marriage, they were trying to decide whether they wanted to get a puppy or have children. And she said, so it basically became a decision between, did we want to ruin our carpet or ruin our lives? Which is a funny thing to think about. But in reality, what we know she's saying is it was a choice between keeping life the way it is as we know it and like it, and venturing into an area that is so unknown and foreign to us that we're not sure if we want to do that. It's kind of scary. But that's not as fun.
No.
I was listening to NPR this week, and they were interviewing Jim Gaffigan. You know, the comic Jim Gaffigan. And he made Hot Pockets. My kids loved it. Anyway, he was basically saying that becoming a father helped him be less selfish. That before he had a child, he had no idea how really self-centered and selfish he actually was. And how impatient he could be. And he said, over time, what I've had to accept is that becoming a father made me more human. And that's what I'd like to explore this morning. It makes us less selfish and more aware of the needs of other people when we become parents. And in essence, we grow up helping our children grow up. That's been my experience. Less selfish and less self-centered. If we're healthy and we want to be good parents, the mere act of becoming a father or mother makes the world a much bigger place. And it's not all about us anymore. Even when we didn't realize it was all about us before, we learn that when we begin to have children. In our way, each of us shifts our lives from being self-centered to being others-centered. So we begin to take on that spiritual principle of being of service. Who knew that's what it meant to be a parent? But our lives are not about us anymore, and we can't decide to do things just on our own for ourselves without the filter of what does this mean to other people, and then what can I bring to the table for them. So being of service really is one of the fundamental building blocks of being a good parent. There are other spiritual principles involved that I'd like to explore this morning. In the first, after service, the first I'd like to talk about is how very necessary it is to shift the way we are in the world and become more accepting of the fact that we're not in control of everything. And that we need to surrender. That I can't pull the levers and make everything work out the way I want to make it work out. We learned that very early on, before the children ever came into the world, because they were born premature. And I remember their mother Cheryl and I went to see her doctor that morning and had plans for breakfast afterwards, and he checked her all out and said, no, you're going into the hospital right now. And we need to keep those babies inside to make sure they've got another month or they may not make it. And they put her in the hospital on bed rest for an entire month. And we just had to keep our fingers crossed. And that not knowing and having to surrender and let go and accept the outcome was something I hope very few people have to ever sit in. And then when they were born, they had to spend a month in the NICU, in the neonatal intensive care unit. And seeing them, they were 3 pounds plus a little bit when they were born. They were so small. You look at them today, you never know. But they were they're so small and so fragile. And to just accept the fact that I had to turn their outcome over to people who I hope studied a lot more than I did. I always wanted to tell those doctors, thank you so much for studying as hard as you did, because who knows where this turned out. But that sense of surrender and acceptance that I don't have everything under control. That's kind of a shock to the system. And once you get past that, it's accepting the fact that the world is a big old place and your children are now in it. And for me, it was a real aha to realize I can't protect them all the time. There's a certain level of letting go that I have to do that's been incredibly hard for me. Just sending them off to school with their little lunch bags. They were so proud of their Scooby-Doo lunch boxes, whatever they had, and sending them off with a pat and going to have a great day, and knowing other adults were now going to be in charge of them. Letting go of their education, that part of their education, and realizing, good grief, they're going to spend 7, 8 hours a day with other grown-ups, and trust that that's going to be a good experience for them. And then when they come up and go, Daddy, I want to go do a sleepover at somebody's house. Okay, who are these people? I want to know who they are. And I want to do a criminal background check. I want to get references. But the idea of letting my children go out into the world has been a very challenging process for me. And accepting that I just need to surrender. I need to show up and do what I can do and be as responsible as I can be, but to a certain extent. That only goes so far, and then they are children of the universe. So, becoming more of service, one spiritual lesson, and the other is the need to accept certain things and surrender to what actually is a process. Now, along the way, another gigantic spiritual principle that I've gained is humility. I don't know, guys, if you've suffered from this, but I have to constantly check how I'm trying to live through my kids. Right? I never wanted to be the dad who pushed his son to go do this or his daughter to go do that. And despite that awareness, I do have to recognize that when they're doing a school play and they're out there, I got my fingers crossed that they show well. Right? And part of that is because I want it for them, but I have to own that deep down it's kind of like, that's a reflection of me. That's my boy up there doing that. To get credit for that. It's humbling to think that I can feel that way. Right? But there's also so many lessons that my children have taught me. And one of those things is that I need to remember humility. I'll never forget. They were young, and I said something sharply to John. I was impatient with him. And Grace could hear the anger in my voice. And they probably weren't this tall. And she put her hands on her hips and said, don't talk to my brother that way. Oh. And I was like, thank you for reminding me of that. Okay. Those lessons are always available for me if I'm open to learning them. And I've shared this story before. It kind of goes back to that sense of I want them to show well. But one of my favorite stories about Grace is her being in that Christmas pageant in preschool. And they had all the kids, it was in a church, and there was a manger scene at the front, and there was a little baby Jesus on a piece of wood, right? You could see it. They kind of had it up so you could see the baby Jesus. And And all the kids came in, and one kid had this long berry beard, you know. He was like one of the wise men or the shepherds, and all the little kids had animal outfits on, and Grace was a cow or a sheep or something. I can't remember, but they all filed in, and Grace was one of the last ones to come in. And she got to the end of it and turned around and saw all of the parents there. There must have been 200 people there. And she looked around like this and decided to play it for laughs.
Yay!
And she goes, ooh. She crossed her eyes and did her head like this, and she was going to act like she was going to faint, and she missed the baby Jesus. And this mark, because I had this momentary sense that she was going to hit it, and the baby Jesus catapulted out into the group. Boy, I would have looked bad then. But Grace at that Christmas pageant is something I'll never forget. It was so real, and it was so scary. It was so funny. The other thing when it comes to humility, I'm always reminded of that Mark Twain quote about when he was 14, his dad was the most ignorant man he'd ever met. And by the time he was 21 and came back, it was amazing how much his dad had learned. Yeah, I'm beginning to move into that phase with him now, where I've just got goober written across me. Still, they haven't asked me, okay, we're going to the movies, would you please drop us off a couple blocks away so my friends don't have to see you? We haven't gone there yet, but I can sense Grace is a little more tolerant. John is like, Dad, go back to dad class or something. You're the biggest goober in the world. I mean, so I guess we all experience that. Maybe I'm a bigger goober than other people, but I think that part is teaching me some humility too. And thinking about how I used to view my own parents and realizing how gooberish I thought they were. And knowing that my kids, that's just part of the process, I think, that they grow through and we grow through with them. So service and a sense of acceptance and surrender and humility, tremendous lessons we gain as parents. And one of the others is patience and tolerance. Recognizing that we're children and that they're going to make mistakes and that they're going to disappoint us and we're going to disappoint them. But patience and tolerance. One time, years ago, I spoke here and I can't remember the context, but I remember saying, if you ask me what words describe being a parent to young children, what's it like? It would be sticky and moist. It's just what it is to be a parent. It's sticky all the time. So I heard a guy talking one day, and he was just saying how for a time as a father, he resented his children. And he resented his wife, and he resented having to go home, and he wanted to go play, and he wanted to go be in his band, and he wanted to go do this, but he knew he had to be a parent. And he said, and I got to this place where if I had to go home one more time and smell syrup and urine, I was just going to leave forever. But that patience and tolerance that we develop over time is another deep and abiding life lesson our children teach us. And along with that is forgiveness. And I think more than anything else, at least in my experience, recognizing that I make mistakes every day with my children, and that I hope they have the generosity of spirit to forgive me. No matter how hard I try, I know I make mistakes. And that when I raise my voice, or I give them the dirty look, or I'm impatient, or I'm distracted, and all those times they need me and I'm not there, that overall, they know I was well intended. That I was trying to be a loving father, to be there for them. So I love that John Prine song, Fish and Whistle, Whistle and a Fish, get it. One of the lines in it is, Father, forgive us, For what we must do, you forgive us and we'll forgive you. We'll both forgive each other till we both turn blue. And we'll whistle and go fishing in heaven. I hope they forgive me. But in that process, I realize it's probably important for me to have that capacity looking back on my own life with my own parents. And I find at least in my experience, it's so much easier for me to forgive other people than it is for me to forgive myself. And after that, my parents, for their own human faults and frailties and fears and insecurities. It's so very difficult to sit in forgiveness of our parents, at least for me. I can't speak for everybody, but that's a challenge. So forgiveness of them, hoping that they forgive me, and then me being able to look my life and forgive my parents. And all the adults that were in my life when I was a child, that may have been well-intentioned and said something hurtful, or trying to be motivating, and when they were trying to be motivating, they were actually belittling. I can remember scoutmasters and coaches and men that were in my life that may have thought they were having a positive influence on me that was really hurtful. And so I think I need to sit in forgiveness on a day like this and just kind of remember it. So, service, acceptance and surrender, humility, patience and tolerance, and forgiveness. And then I loved the book that we had, the story we read for our Story for All. Because one of the things that I do need to remember to do all the time, and I have a pretty easy time with this, but it's to be silly and just have fun. And to remember to dance with them and sing with them. Now, this is in the privacy of our own home. They don't like it when I do that in group. Although Grace has got to be a lot better about it. She'll dance and sing with me in public. John just backs away. Like, I don't know these people. I was kidnapped. I'm making my escape right now. But boy, that idea of having fun. I need to remember what it must look like to a small child to have someone that's 6'4", my size, come into the room and just be right-sized and available and fun and goofy with them. Because that's how I'm going to communicate best. Grace and I were singing along to Harry Nielsen on the way up here. It was a great thing, and we were clapping our hands, and we drove past a car. We got really tickled by the expression of the person that we drove past. And the next person we drove past, Grace looked at me and went, "Daddy, he was dancing." So just to be present for that is great. But to be fun and silly, I think, is a lesson I need to remember always when it comes to my children. And finally, this sense of stewardship. That it doesn't do any good for me to just talk the talk. That I really need to be present and try to walk the walk. And here's where I need to be reminded of that most. When I go into their bedrooms and go, "Oh my God, will you please clean this up?" And then when I turn around and look at the living room, I see all of my stuff scattered everywhere. And God forbid they come up and look at my bedroom, because who knows, there's probably a puppy living up there. I don't even know about it. But the idea of walking the walk instead of just talking the talk, and being there as a steward in their lives, and also letting them see me do this in interaction with everyone. Service, acceptance, surrender, humility, patience, and tolerance, being fun and silly, forgiveness, and finally, stewardship. All spiritual principles that I get a deeper insight into and more opportunity to practice being a parent. And whether you're a father or a mother, those spiritual principles guide our relationship with our children. But it occurs to me, we get to hone these principles as parents. But these are principles that we need to also develop, just being human. so that it's really fair to kind of think about what Jim Gaffigan said. Being a parent helped him become more human. But I think you could turn that on its head too, because you don't have to be a parent to practice these principles and develop them in your life. So in a sense, we all have an opportunity to be parents in the world. To the people that we interact with, the lady that sells us something at the convenience store, or the clerk, or the person that helps us find something at Home Depot, or our child's teacher, or you name all the people that we intersect with in the course of the day. We have an opportunity to behave in ways. We have an opportunity to be good stewards. And in a way, we're all parents each day as we move through life. And so I guess what I would like to end by saying is Jim Gaffigan's comment, becoming a parent has made him more human. But I think we could also embrace the idea that to become more human, we need to consider ourselves as parents in all of our interactions with people. So I would just end this way. Happy Father's Day. Happy Mother's Day. Happy parents.